remember a phrase coming to me, and I thought, that's not very spiritual, but boy, it really does help. Just do the next thing. Whatever your soul needs, whatever the Lord opens. And sometimes the next thing was praying with someone. And sometimes the next thing the Lord said, okay, come away and rest.
Hey friends, welcome back to another Grow Together podcast. My name is Anna McGuire, and I am so excited and honored to have a conversation with you today. Today's conversation is one that I believe is of great relevance and importance to us as ministers. If you've been in ministry for any given amount of time, you've experienced walking with people through grief and loss. And if you're human, more than likely, you've experienced grief and loss firsthand. But what can be really challenging as a ministry leader, whether we're a pastor, a chaplain, or doing nonprofit work, how do we navigate loss in our own lives while still stewarding the ministry, shepherding the people that God has entrusted us with? I don't know about you, but it can feel like a tug of war at times. And it can feel like there's this pull to totally suppress the feelings of grief or loss or pain in the name of quote unquote, like carrying on. But here we are today. We want to have a conversation of what it looks like navigating grief while in ministry. Our two amazing and breathtaking guests are dear women to me. I've already cried in preparation for this today while I was having my morning prayer time, because these two women mean the world to me. So I've gotten the tears out. So I'm hoping that as I just talk about them, that they don't come back. Not because I don't want to show my affection and love for them, but because I want to be able to speak these sentences. But these two women have held a very special place in my heart for the last 12 years. Their names are Angelia Carpenter and Lexa Pope, which Lexa was formerly Lexa Carpenter. This is a mother and daughter who are amazing women of God, and also the sister and mother of my best friend and college roommate. And so I have gotten to have the privilege and the opportunity to have a front row seat to them experiencing loss and grief in their own lives. And they're going to share more of their stories in just a few moments. But just to give you a little bit of introduction on them, Angelia Carpenter is a legend. She's been in ministry for 30 plus years with her husband, Thomas. She was the Arkansas Women's Ministries Director. She is currently an AGWM missionary, and she's reaching and serving families with special needs. Lexa Pope, man, it's so crazy to see her just thriving and serving in ministry. She's going on her 6th year in Chi Alpha. She is the director of Chi Alpha at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. She's married to her amazing her husband, Michael, and they're expecting a sweet baby very, very soon in the month of September. So you guys, I know that you're going to enjoy hearing from the amazing Lexa and Angelia today. Welcome. We are so honored to have the two of you.
Our privilege, my privilege, for sure. Thank you, Anna.
So I think this is the first time we've ever had a mother-daughter on the podcast together. So I feel like this is so special because, Lexa, what generation of minister are you now then in your family?
Am I third? Is this third gen?
I think you're fourth.
I've been saying third. Wow, fourth gen.
Fourth. Yes. I remember, so I was not raised in a ministry family of amazing parents who are both first generation Christian. And I remember when I met Janelle, and she had like grandparents in ministry and great grandparents in ministry and parents in ministry, and like people like grandparents who prayed for her. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. I'm like, is this the way it's supposed to be? I had never seen anything like it before. And so cool just to see the legacy that you all have lived out, just honoring you guys, you and Thomas, Angelia, that how you guys have just modeled that for your family. And
God
so
is faithful.
Yes. Yes. So such a special conversation to have today. And so, Angela, you have been in ministry for 30 plus years, and you've served in a variety of roles, from lead pastoring to directing women's ministry to now working with families with special needs. So you're pretty, you've been around serving people through their loss quite a bit through the years.
Yes. The Lord has opened a lot of doors, and you want to be genuine and have relationship and really walk through life with people. And then it makes a difference when it hits your own home, because then you can relate to people on a whole new level. So yeah, God allows those situations.
Yeah. Would you share with us a little bit about your journey with loss and grief?
And actually, I'm backing it up. Just one situation in my mind. It was actually December of 2010 that I lost my one and only brother. He had a battle with cancer. He was only 48. So people die at all ages with cancer, but always too young. And then, so 10 months later, we had an unexpected situation in our family where my sweet mother-in-law and our 8-year-old son were killed in a car accident. And so when these things happen, I could relate a little bit with my daughters, because I had just lost my only brother. That was still fresh. And then my daughters losing their only brother. There we are. What can you do? You can't change the situation. And so some changes in life you expect, and others present themselves. And so you say, okay, Jesus, where do we go from here? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was in 2010, you lost your brother. And then 10 months later, 2011, you lost your son and mother-in-law in that window of time. And here you were in that time, you were the Arkansas Women's Ministries director. So very visible role, leading and serving a lot of people. So here you were in this place of navigating double grief, and yet still expected to lead other people.
Yes. Yeah. Life can be real. Life is raw, but hindsight is better, isn't it? When we then we look back and we see, actually the Lord, Anna, in January, after my brother had passed away in December, in January, just in prayer, I felt a change coming in our family. And all year long, I just prayed. I'm like, Lord, what is it? Are we moving? Are we changing ministry? I just couldn't put my finger on it. And it was actually at General Council of 2011 in Arizona. I just felt like the Lord was going to speak to me that week, and felt like it was going to be at the altar at some major, service. But it was actually early one morning. The Lord woke me up and he said, I want to speak to you. And so felt like he was just going to tell me what this amazing, wonderful new change was going to be. And actually he just said, there is a change coming, but don't try to guess it. You could never guess it. Just trust me. And it was 2 months later. So, the Lord speaks to each of us so personally and so individually. And so that's why we can't put our relationship with Lord in a box, and we can't put our grief in a box to say, you have to handle it this way or that way. We certainly can learn from each other, but God's very personal in how he prepares us and how he walks with us.
Wow. Thank you for saying that. That's powerful. Powerful. And Lexa, so you were experiencing loss in the sense of you lost your brother, but then even as recently your own loss, and as you have been, so that happened when you were a teenager, and now here you are an adult in ministry. Would you share a little bit about your journey and what your experience has been as a, I mean, you can jump off both, whatever that
Yeah.
looks like.
Yeah. I'm very fortunate to have a mom who really went through that grieving process and got to watch. And that will really just be a theme, I think, of everything I say today is the blessing of getting to watch other people experience things and learn from it in advance has just been incredibly helpful. But I guess I'll pick up in my story from October of 2021, which is 10 years later from the accident. And that October, or like that fall season, I started having all these weird feelings and started to get really emotional. And, you know, and you start to experience emotions that are just way heightened for the situation. You're like, is that something? Is that nothing? And basically God told me, like, Lex, there are a lot of things specifically with your brother's death that you never dealt with. You never grieved. You never kind of took care of. And I want to resolve all that now, 10 years removed. And so that October, November, December, that little season was just, it was like it happened all over again. I actually went with a friend on a little weekend trip to a cabin. And we just said she had lost a friend 5 or so years ago and had never dealt with it, like never completely dealt with it. And, or I should say, never fully submitted that process to God. There was always this resistance of like, let's not talk about it. So we went to a little cabin and we did all these little practices, I guess you could say. My favorite one and the hardest one was to set a chair in front of you and fill them in on all the things that they've missed since they've been gone. Like pretend like they're sitting in front of you and fill them in on all the things that they had missed. That was such a, oh my goodness, emotional, but such a healing time. So that was that October. And then in January, my mom's dad, my grandfather, passed away of cancer super suddenly. So that was just like another kind of whammy. And then in February, we got pregnant. We felt like God said, it's time, you can move forward. Getting pregnant, we don't have any kids yet. And we got pregnant in February. And we went for our first ultrasound, our 8-week ultrasound. And the ultrasound tech was checking everything. And then she said, well, she's a little small, or we obviously didn't know the gender. The baby's a little small. It's actually measuring around 6 weeks. That could mean something. It could mean nothing. Come back in 1 week and we'll see what happens. So that whole week was such a, I mean, it's a blur looking back on it now, but the swirl of emotions and what to put our hope in, what to feel during that time. And so we went back a week later and the baby had not grown, it had shrunk. And so she said, it's no longer a viable pregnancy. Here are your 3 options. And basically the 3 options were, let the baby just kind of pass naturally at home. And that was a very scary prospect for me because you just don't know what's supposed to happen or what's going to happen. And you're doing it by yourself. And then the second option was to take medicine to induce it. So at least you know when it's coming. Still a very scary option. And then the third option was to have a procedure. It's called a DNC. To basically just do it all at one time, remove the baby. And it's a pretty simple procedure. And so we wound up going with the third option. And in God's kindness, it wasn't expensive. I think it was going to be $3,000. And God wound up covering it for us. There was a charity we didn't even know that we qualified for. They just called and said, we wanted to let you know that your procedure is covered. So we felt really taken care of by God, but also very blindsided and very confused. And a lot of that space in the week-long period of what we don't know what's going to happen felt like a combination of, man, this is a setup. Like all testimonies have to start out somehow, and it has to start off with an impossible situation, and this is where God comes through. Combined with, we don't want to hold God to something that he didn't ever say.
Yeah.
So if he's not going to say, I'm going to heal your baby, then we can't like hold him to a promise he didn't make, so to say. So it's like holding in tandem hope and like, if whatever you want to do, we trust you. So that was obviously super blindsiding. And I'll end it with probably one of the more difficult parts in the grieving process, except for some reason my body wouldn't click back, and it still thought it was pregnant for another 3 months. So I still had the bloat, I still had all the hormones, I still had all the sickness, except this time it felt like it's for nothing. So that was just like the nail in the coffin of what on earth are you trying to teach me through this? So that was the succession of like 3 things in a row that felt very disorienting while still trying to be present with other people.
Wow. That last sentence, I feel like that could be like the chapter of a book title or something that's disorienting while still trying to be present with other people. And so kind of speaking for firsthand before like getting to other people, how was it for each of you that, okay, I'm like, so Lexa, you are the Chi Alpha director you have an amazing husband who does marketplace work.
Yes.
And so here you are leading the charge with Chi Alpha, and you have built a team around you. How is it that you're like still like proclaiming the gospel, the good news, announcing the kingdom, and yet like you're saying my body wouldn't click back in, like I'm dealing with all of the symptoms of pregnancy but without a child there? Like how did that change, or how did that affect the way that you were describing God, or even, sharing about good news in the midst of being in a really hard place?
Yeah. That was tough at first. It was tough to not feel the pressure to compartmentalize my life in ministry, to not say like, well, this is me time and this is them time. And there's obviously so much need and space to get alone and to be by yourself and to process with God. But God really helped me through that time. I mean, the theme, probably if I had to put a theme to it, would have been God pressing me into more vulnerability, which is so funny because it's something that I talk about all the time. But Michael, my husband, always says that vulnerability is that last 5% that you don't want to share. That, yeah, I can talk about this and talk about this, especially if you're removed from it. And especially if there's testimony involved in it and God's already redeemed stuff. It's a lot easier to talk about. But it's much more difficult in the middle of what's happening to talk about it and to be present and to go ahead and say that last 5% that you don't want to say. So I had the temptation to, and I think I was pretty good at it, honestly, to like pull myself together. This is them time. Like I need to take care of them. And I felt like what God started showing me was what the girls that I was walking with really needed the most was not for me to come in well prepared or to have my stuff together or to, be on top of it, so to say.
Yeah.
Mostly because that's just not real. And what would be more impactful for them is to see someone actually go through it.
Sure.
And to show up to our meetings and I'm kind of a mess. And grief is so funny that it's never linear. It's never just like First this step, then this one, then this one.
Mm-hmm.
You're like laughing really hard one second and then
Mm-hmm.
crying your eyes out the next.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel a little bit crazy. You feel a little bit like, am I off my rocker? Because the swing of emotions is always happening.
Yeah.
And to invite the girls into that space, allow them to see God's faithfulness being played out, not in retrospect, but in real time. And
Wow.
them being present with me in those moments, I'm really going to cry thinking about it. Like having them pray for me. And then they wound up speaking truth back to me that I had taught them before.
Wow.
And it wound up being really good and healthy for them. Like if most of my conversations with them are like, what do you need? How's your life? What's going on with you? And me pouring into them, this was a space where they saw like, to be a leader doesn't mean to be invincible. It means to be where you're at with God. And they felt this. I saw in them this, like, I know how to help you. I'm present with you.
Yeah.
And they wound up ministering to me. And through them being so interwoven in the story, they're so invested in what God's doing on our campus and in my life personally. They're so excited for us to have a baby in September. They are so, like, they have been personally impacted by getting to see what it's really like to be devoted to God when it's not easy, rather than someone saying this is what it's like. So God honestly helped me grieve with them. And it took a lot of vulnerability to not be as on top of things as I wanted to be. But like, what is that? What does that even, what's the point of having your stuff together in their eyes? But it's such a really false narrative for what life really looks like. And they need to see the real thing.
I love that. Like, first of all, two things. I'm going to steal this from Michael. Vulnerability is the last 5% you don't want to share. But then that language of, instead of sharing with them in retrospect, I had the opportunity to share with them in real time. That's powerful. Powerful. And what's amazing is because I get to see your ministry and all of that, like the fruit that is coming from UT Chats, Chi Alpha, like amazing. And I just think, like, as I'm hearing you say that, I'm like, God, how did you use that season to create what's happening there now? So that's, amazing. So Angela, kind of like building off of what like Lexa shared, I would love to hear, like, as you were going through loss, and I feel like there's so much of your story. Like, Angela, I need your whole life in a book, because I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface to the last. Oh, yes, it's coming. But
It's all good.
But even the last 2 or 3 years, with Thomas having, her husband was one of the first like serious cases of COVID-19 back in 2020 and was hospitalized for how long? Like, I want to say like 60 days.
Yeah, 56. He was in the hospital for a total of 56 days. He was in a coma for 33. The Lord, you know what? The Lord doesn't waste one experience, Anna. He sees the big picture. And that's why, Lexa nailed it early on in her comments that through tears, maybe through clenched teeth at times, we say, God, I trust you. Where else Peter says, where else do I have to go? You alone have the words of life. Where else am I going to find the answer? Lord, you are the answer. And so, couple things I was thinking of when Lexa was making her comments, if I can just kind of encapsulate everything. But I remember watching Lexa in high school after Buck passed away. The week before the accident, Lexa had invited Buck to her weekly like Bible club, a Christian club that happened during lunchtime. And Buck was in junior Bible quiz, and she had said, come on, Buck, I want you to come quote some verses, show these students, that they can learn the Bible and answer some Bible questions. And he was like all freaked out, scared. And Lexa was always his cheerleader and his, come on, you can do this. And he was all scared by the football players coming in and everything. And she was like, Buck, you can do this. I'll give you a Dr. Pepper and all the pizza you can eat. And he's like, okay, I'll do it then. So anyway, God just so timed that, because there was maybe the largest group Lex had ever had. Wow. So Buck was a huge testimony right before he passed away. He made an impact, and for sure God timed that. So, it wasn't a really big high school. Everybody already knew who Lexa was, but then having Buck come, everybody knew who little brother was. And so when Buck passed away, man, all eyes were on Lexa. They were really watching her to see how she was going to live her life. Okay, you're a Christian. And I remember her, I don't know if you remember this conversation, Lex, but you came home from school one day and, you were just feeling the pressure of it, because Lexa always had this huge, fun personality. That was just who God made her. And she still had that deep down inside, but sitting on top of that was her hurt and her pain, And she said, sometimes I just feel the pressure to be perfect, and we chatted it out, and we had lots of nights with Lexa just laying in bed and me kneeling by her bed and us agreeing in prayer together. And she prayed for me and I prayed for her. And I said, you know what, Lexa, you don't have to be perfect. You have to just be real. What they have to see is somebody that is walking through this. And no, not every day is I'm on top of the world day, but every day God is walking with me through it. And so it has just filled up my heart then to see Lexa as a young woman doing that in full-time ministry. God prepared her for that sweet grandchild that one day we'll have. And so for me, then balancing, if we kind of land on talking about balancing our own grief and then ministering to people, the first thing that comes to my mind is time after time, I would have women come to me either in person, I'd be at an event or on the phone or however it would be, and they would start to share something that they were going through, or like I knew, and I would ask about it. And over and over again, women would say, oh, but Angela, it's okay. I don't have to tell you about it. It's nothing in comparison to what you're going through. And every time I would stop them and I would say, no, listen, we are called to bear one another's burdens. And it helped me to get my focus on myself. And at times, really dig into someone else's need and agree with them. And it was healing to me to reach out and to say, you know what? No, we can't say, well, mine's worse than yours, or, because we can all go through, we've all had people pass away that we love, and we all deal with it differently, and nobody deals with it perfectly. So we're there to lift each other up. And so there does have to be the balance of if I didn't have my time of Jesus pouring into me, just one-on-one, then I wouldn't have anything to give out to anybody else. So as we just stay in tune with the Spirit, and I slowly made my way back into, my ministry office was very patient with me, and going to the office was therapy for me to keep going. I had to keep going. And yeah, I remember days being at the office and, I had the freedom to come and go. And if I didn't have an event or something going, I remember more than once going home and going to bed because I had to sleep. I had to just go be by myself and pray, And so for me, I remember a phrase coming to me, and I thought, that's not very spiritual, but boy, it really does help. Just do the next thing. Just do the next, whatever your soul needs, whatever the Lord opens. And sometimes the next thing was praying with someone. And sometimes the next thing the Lord said, it's okay, come away and rest, So there has to be a balance. There has to be a balance. Mm-hmm.
So when and you both have like alluded to this, is like there was like moments where it was like easy, or because you're like, oh man, like it feels good to serve somebody in their need. What about like in the moments where it was like, I have no choice but to show up, but I don't have the energy to show up? Were you guys delegating in those moments? Were you asking for grace, or did you find something that gave you enough strength or energy to do the thing that maybe you felt like you couldn't do?
Do you want me to go first, Lex?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I will give an example of that. Okay. So October 20th was the accident. I was scheduled to teach at our ARSOM, or Arkansas School of Ministry, in November, like just right at a month later. And I remember talking to the person who did the scheduling, and maybe 2 weeks before, and kind of hinting about maybe finding a replacement for me. And she very sweetly and kindly said, oh, like, you've got this, da, 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 and just kind of walked out of the room. And I was like, okay, all right, God, I'm going to teach. That's what I'm supposed to do. And you know what? Again, Hannah, we're all learning from each other in this, but I feel like everything that we do in life and ministry, every situation of life, it just has to be filtered by the Holy Spirit and by God's, it comes from God's hand to us. So I can't say this is the way everybody should do. Everybody should get up and speak 1 month after they have a hard loss. Some people, that would not be right for them. But for me, this was God's setup. The Lord just so took over. And again, it was such great therapy for me to dig into the word and to be ready to speak. And then at the end, the Lord just challenged me just to really share our experience, what led up to the accident and what had happened. And people were already getting saved because of Buck passing. He had football friends getting saved. We had an adult man who got saved the day after. The Lord was already doing beautiful things, and I needed to share those beautiful things. So for me, that's just one example that just like our son Buck and my mother-in-law Nelma, just like their passing was not God going saying, I don't like your family, I'm going to make this terrible thing happen. That's not God's character. Sure. In the same turn, the things that I was asked to do in ministry and moving forward and continuing on, that wasn't God going, doesn't matter how you feel, girl, just get out there and do it. Again, that's not God's character. So for me, the things that he asked me to do that were hard, that's been life. I remember a poster on a Sunday school wall when I was a teenager, and it said, don't ask for an easy life, do hard things. And I remember thinking, okay, God, I can do hard things. I had no idea what I was saying, but that challenge in my spirit, like, for God, I can do hard things. And so whatever he asks us to do, he's going to give us the grace. He's going to give us the strength, and he's not asking us to do something that he's not going to give us the help to do it.
Wow. That's so good.
Yeah.
So good. Lex, I'd love to hear your thoughts or experiences with that.
I had kind of a similar experience, and it wasn't until you started talking that I remembered this, but I was scheduled to lead worship at my church 2 days after the procedure.
Mm.
And I remember thinking to myself, I have every reason to not. And I could feel the volatility in my own heart of I could get up there and just lose it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if emotionally I'm in that place to be able to lead other people. And all the the technical side of doing worship or whatever. But I think in grieving, you really can't trust your own feelings. It's like a whole new meaning to the verse, can't rely on your own understanding.
Yeah.
That your feelings are fluid. They're just constantly moving around. And the end all be all, which Mama already said, is the filter of the Holy Spirit, because only God knows your true capacity at that time.
That's good.
Yeah.
I don't know. So if he says no, girl, you got this. You can do it. I'm with you. It's okay. You can sing. It's going to be good for you. I didn't really feel ready or necessarily excited to do it, but I did it, and it wound up being really good for me. And worshiping, my heart being pulled into worship when it didn't really feel like it, wound up being very good for me. But then there were other things that happened later on where I was I felt the check in my spirit from God that was graciously, no, this is not what you should be doing right now. Because again, only he knows where I'm at emotionally and what's going to be helpful for me and what I should say. I'm sorry, I just don't have that right now. But only he knows that. So.
Wow. And I love that it's the Holy Spirit knows my capacity. So there was times where it was yes, you need to do this. And then other times it was okay, you need to pull back. Yeah. So did you guys find that?
Holy Spirit, you never know.
Yeah. So Alexa, I guess I'll just ask you this then. Did you feel with each assignment or each opportunity you had to have a check-in point with God? Okay, God, is this what I'm supposed to be doing right now?
Yeah. At the beginning, for sure.
Okay.
At first, when things are really disorienting. And honestly, some days you just didn't want to get out of bed. And some days God would be you know what? Just don't worry about getting up and doing the things you need to do right now. Just come be with me. I felt several promptings of just come away and be alone with me right now.
Yeah.
And then, other times where he's you still need to have D group. You still need to do these things. I was oh, I don't want to at all. My heart's not in it. I'm going to be checked out. I don't want to be around people who are going to be draining. And he would lovingly say, but I know what you need.
Yeah.
And that's the only way. He's the way, the truth, and the life. He's the way to true life. So
come on. That's so good. So good. Oh my goodness. I'm processing all of this. Just even Lord, hide this in my heart. This is so helpful, both of you. So I would love to hear. And when Buck and Nelma passed away in the accident 12 years ago now, or almost 12 years ago, I was what month is it? It's July. I got to see, life up close for you all. And Angela, I will never forget the amount of times I heard you pray. I remember one night being at your house, and it was the middle of the night, and I could hear you praying in the other room. Wow. And I remember just that so vividly. I was sleeping on an air mattress, and I was what is that noise? And it was you praying. So I've seen that. but I'd love to hear how, like, what practices, what things, both like maybe for your spiritual health, but also just like the physical, very human side of you, ways did you find that were helpful with not just like coping, but like processing so that in those seasons you didn't suppress and just like put on the mask and carry on, but that you were able to be with yourself and and really do the process of like of the ongoing process of healing.
Mhm. Well, the Psalms are filled with David crying out to God. He had a different situation than I did, but he cried out to God and he was honest. You know, David said a lot about, why are you letting my enemies attack me? Why are you letting for all we know a lot about David's life and hiding in caves, and he was real with God. And I have found that the Lord knows our heart and we can be real. And boy, it's physically, emotionally, spiritually, in every way wrong or bad, I would say, to hold those feelings in.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. Whew. That's really, for me, I found that, and the Lord has dealt, man, hard things can bring out all kinds of stuff in you, right? It can almost become a prideful thing. I'm fine. I'm good, and that's saying, I got it. I don't need to cry out to the Lord. I don't, yeah, I'm not for sure what I was praying when you heard me pray, but let me tell you, there were times, again, especially early on, like I just had to chat things out with the Lord. And I have a picture in my mind. I was down on my knees. We actually had a little couch thing in our bedroom at the foot of our bed. And I remember I pounded the floor a few times. And I just said, Lord, I know, I had to, it just came out of my spirit. It's not like I wrote them down. This is what I'm going to say to God. But in my grief, in my working through it, I just said out loud, Lord, I know that you love our family. I know you love our family. You didn't allow this to happen because you hate us, or you just, this was the son that we prayed 5 years for, and you gave us our promised child. You never told us how long we were going to have him. But so I found myself just praying and saying things about God that I knew to be true. The God that I had known my life, the God that had seen me through a lot of things up until that point. But that, I would say, that was, losing my brother was hard, but obviously, my son and my mother-in-law too, at the same time, I was such great friends with her. She was a beautiful lady in every way. So I just said, God, I know that you love our family. I know your character. I know the character of God. You are good. You're a good God. Your ways are good. And boy, I found myself going to 2 Corinthians 4:8. And if you don't know that address, everybody knows the verse, and it's good in every version, but it's the verse that says, I'm hard pressed on every side, but not crushed. I'm bruised. There's so many variations of it, but it's such a good, and the phrase that, man, I would just breathe in, breathe out, and I would say, Lord, I'm perplexed, but not in despair.
Amen.
I don't understand. Right now, I don't see the big picture. I'm perplexed, but I can't be in despair. Like, I knew where Buck went. He went to heaven. And boy, I had to keep my life right if I'm going to see my son again. I can't let this or unforgiveness towards God hurt this in any way. So I knew the character of God. And I did. God doesn't feel bad at us if we don't understand. He wants us to express our heart and our feelings. And I just feel like that he will show up for us. He's going to show up in little moments, but sometimes he's just going to carry our hearts along, and then we'll look back and we'll say, oh Lord, I see what you were doing. And one more thing on that, I will just tie in, with when Thomas was in his coma. I just prayed, Lord, speak to him the whole time. The Lord actually had given me a promise. He'd given me the word hope. I just knew in my heart that Thomas was coming out of that coma. I didn't know how long it would take. And for 10 days, it's a whole big other story, but for 10 days, Thomas got to spend time in heaven, and he actually spent 10 days with Buck in heaven. And we had all kinds of confirmations that really did happen. And one of them was one day I was in prayer and I saw a picture of Buck, and the Lord's just been so good to give me dreams and pictures of Buck in heaven. And he was throwing baseball, and I didn't see who he was throwing that baseball to. And then when Thomas finally came home, he said, babe, I played catch with Buck. Wow. I said, was he wearing a blue shirt? And he said, yeah, he was. I'm like, let me show you my journal. So journaling was one thing that, wow, I just, you know what? Write it out to God. Write out your thoughts, your feelings. It's like David in the Psalms again. And I wrote out everything, and it was a release and it was a help. And I've gone back to that. And then I journaled the whole time that Thomas was in his coma, and it paid off, because so many things that I saw in prayer, Thomas experienced when he was in his coma. And
wow.
Pour your heart out, be real with God, and then be able to look back and see how God, he set you up.
Wow. So beautiful. So beautiful. Well, Lexa, I would love to hear what were some of your processes or ways that you really begun to heal, or that helped you on the journey of healing.
Yeah. I don't know if there's really much more to add beyond what Mom said, but my kind of go-to was definitely suppression. I'm really, really good, unfortunately, at distracting myself. And obviously, per the 10 years removed, God's having to readdress me and say, hey, you've always been kind of like doing this. So can we talk about it now? So when we had the miscarriage, I was just coming off the heels of that experience and how good and healing it was. So I was like, I'm going to work through all of this. I'm not going to suppress anything. I'm going to so I started working through these really hard questions, the confusing, like we thought we got several confirmations that it was going to go well, but it didn't. And just all this stuff around grief. And I remember like really soon after calling the lady that walks with me, her name's Jen, and just kind of like word vomiting all these questions and all these things that I was like trying to work through about, I mean, just real thick theological questions. And I remember her saying, Lex, these are ancient questions. You're not the first person to be asking these. And you're going to have plenty of time to work through them. Right now, you're in shock. Your body and your mind and your hormones and everything is kind of like thrown in the air right now. And you need to let God just hold you for a little while. He's going to reveal everything. He's going to help you process. He's going to answer those thick questions that you do have. But there is not a time crunch. Your healing does not hinge on you understanding. Wow. Really, you need to let God just minister to you first. And I remember what a kind of a relief that was. And I felt like God gave me 3 things to do to just be faithful in that time. What does faithfulness even mean unless God defines it for you? Because my output or my performance was so different than what it was pre this experience. So I can't measure myself. I have to let God be my measurement. So I felt like he told me 3 specific things to do that I don't think are necessarily a formula for anybody. The formula is just doing what God tells you to do. But I was really thankful he gave me these 3 really tangible things. The first one was to stay present. And what he meant by that was when you have this influx of emotions, no matter what they are, I'm initiating those, I'm bringing them out, and you experiencing those emotions is actually you releasing them. And when you pull them back in, then they stay cooped up, and then they can like kind of fester. So whenever you feel like you want to cry, you do it. And I was the best at going into the grocery store, like crying in the car, and I'm about to go in, and I turn the AC on full blast, and I blow my face and like try to pull it together. And God was like, if you cry in the grocery store, cry in the grocery store. And if you're happy, don't feel guilty about being happy and having a good time. And if you are angry, experience those emotions with me, but don't filter it based on your environment. Just be present and let it happen as it happens. And boy, that was hard, because that's the vulnerability part. And that's, then I feel like I'm infringing on other people. Like I'm doing it in front of you and you can see it. And the cashier's like, is she okay? But that really helped me not suppress all the emotions. The second thing that he told me to do is not be on social media. And not that social media is the bad thing, but it was just way too accessible and too easy. Whenever I was feeling ick, I could just get on my phone and be mindless. And I craved being mindless. I craved escaping. And escaping doesn't really fix the problem. It really prolongs it. So that was the thing for me that God said, don't do it for this semester. And that was really helpful to keep me present to my emotions, because that can help me escape. And then the third thing was to read my Bible 30 minutes a day. And I will say that it was not spectacular. It was not like my time spent with God, especially early on, right after it happened, was not necessarily majestic or exciting, but it felt like this is the least I can do. I don't have a lot to give emotionally in this quiet time, so to say. I'm not super engaged even, but I think that God knew I needed to just have my mind renewed. So even if it was just a very kind of routine or even robotic practice, just doing it every day kept my eyes coming back to him. And when we're in pain, it's so easy to just, for our eyes, honestly, to just go on us and what's happening. So for God to give me something really simple, to retrain my eyes to go back to him consistently, even though it didn't feel spiritual and it didn't feel productive. I was really thankful that God kind of just gave me, if you do nothing else, just do these 3 things. And it was kind of like, Michael and I were joking about this, but this analogy that I use, it's kind of like me getting in the inner tube at the lazy river. Like those 3 things were me getting in and trusting that God would just lead me and take me where I needed to be. He would take care of the rest. So those are some things in this last go round that were really helpful.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. I love it. I love it. Make your journal your own version of Psalms. I love that like idea is like, you're right. Like that's how David wrote the Psalms, was describing his emotions and his thoughts. And Lexa, I love the practical things like of being present, and social media can be a big deterrent from that. And then that last piece of really giving yourself the opportunity to be in the Word. And powerful. You guys, it is an honor to be able to not only hear your story, but to see you both saying yes to Jesus, more than being ministers, more than being pastors. You both are missionaries, AGWM, AGUS, like you guys, I mean, more than being that you guys have determined and chosen to abide in Jesus through everything, and that you still love him and that you still receive his love. And so honored to know you, honored that you would share your hearts with us today. And I so believe that this is going to resonate with at least one person, that they're going to feel seen and known and loved and feel like they have some clarity to move forward in their own grief journey. And then even how we can serve others in theirs too. So thank you both so much for being a part of this conversation today and sharing that last 5%, Lexa, here with us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Emma.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
I love you
Thank
both.
you for your heart for women. Amen.
Thank
Love
you.
you,
I
Emma.
love you. Love you guys. Well, how amazing was that? I'm like, I have notes to finish up, but I'm like, I just want to sit and process that. The hope in which they spoke with, but also like the weight of their feelings. Like they didn't shy away from both. And how refreshing is that to hear? And so thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. If this did resonate with you, I encourage you to share this with any other women or ministry leader, even men in your life that need to have a conversation when it comes to their own grief or even how to maybe lead and serve others in theirs. Thank you again for being a part of Grow Together and being a part of supporting us here at the Network of Women's Ministers. We will see you next time.